Yeah, here we go. Thank you again, everyone, for joining in. We'll begin the session now. We'll just start with a brief introduction of, or maybe Adhiraj, if you could introduce yourself for us a bit, we'll start from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Adhiraj. I am an entrepreneur and a management consultant based out of New Delhi. I'm an engineering graduate from NSIT, University of Delhi. I've been with a consulting firm called Impendi Analytics for the past 3 or 4 years, basically doing procurement consulting work for Fortune 500 companies in the US. Um, in my MBA journey, I had admits from three schools with a lot of help from Arvind along the way. I'm happy to say that I'm going to be going to INSEAD in the Jan 24 intake with a scholarship amount as well. Yeah, happy to be here and happy to share my experiences.
Yeah, thank you, Adhiraj. Appreciate your time. I think it'll be helpful for especially for candidates that are applying to NCR and the likes to hear your views. So yeah, we all appreciate your time and joining us. So for those of you guys who know me or who don't know me, so I'm an alumni of the HEC Paris MBA, graduated in 2019, and I worked in Dubai for a while after that in strategy consulting. And I moved back to India last year, so now I run my admissions consulting boutique called admitStreet. And so yeah, over the past year, I've worked with a number of candidates like Adhiraj, sort of helping them get into some of the top schools in the world. So with that, we'll just start with what we are trying to cover today. So as I said, it'll be split into two. The first half we'll go through some of the slides we have, some of the excerpts from the essays we have, and the second half will be for Q&A. So the first five topics that you see here are basically trying to answer the question, how do you best differentiate yourself, right? So because it's a competitive process, especially for a business school like INSEAD or any of the top, say, 20, 30 schools, being from sometimes from an Indian pool becomes even more competitive because you're sort of in that overrepresented demographic. So we thought it'll be good to go through some of the key ways, including building a compelling narrative, how to write impactful essays, how to research your school, your target school well, and basically how to sort of nail the interviews. And then we'll have the last part of the webinar sort of to Q&A. So with that, I guess we'll just get started with the first part, which is how do you build a compelling narrative, right? So the goal of any application, right, any successful application is to convince in a way, or you're selling yourself to the admissions committee, right? So that they need to pick you versus say a bunch of other candidates. So hopefully the goal is to build a compelling narrative that covers a couple of the things, right? First is just a second, I'm just going to admit a couple of people waiting on the bridge. Here we go. So sorry. So first, starting with why MBA, right? So having clear and concise answers to these questions, starting with why MBA is important. So when you a weaker sort of answer could be something like I want to network, I want to sort of build a business sense, I want to sort of develop an understanding of businesses. While those may still be true, what is more compelling is basically sort of giving very specific examples, right, of what are the skills that you've developed, what are the skills. We'll go through that in Adhiraj will talk a bit about his essays in the next slide. But basically the goal is to be clear on what are the specific skills that you've developed over, say, your number of years of experience, and why an MBA makes sense, right? What are the gaps in terms of skill sets, both hard and soft skills, that will help you achieve your goals. So that's the first part on why MBA, and the next is around why this particular B school, right? So if you take NCR, say LBS, because every school is different. They have their own ethos, their resources, right? So while there are common traits to most common or most top business schools, having clear, sort of understanding of why this business school is important in terms of, so you need to back it up with reasoning or data, right? So when you say that I would be exposed to a good consulting cohort at NCR, is a slightly weaker answer. Right? What would be a stronger answer is to say, what are the specific clubs, or what are the specific industry associations, or what are the consulting companies that recruit from INSEAD that will help you get there, right? That is and for each school this answer is different, right? So why MBA can be common, or at least pretty common to your essays, to maybe if you're applying to other schools, but why this particular B school can never be repeated, because every school is unique, and that's where I generally suggest to spend the most time, right, researching and understanding why that or how that school would help you. And the third part is about your post MBA goals, right? So three things here: sector, function, geography. So something that is compelling or clear, or well thought of is, for example, in Adhiraj's case, it was basically saying target sector and function is consulting or management strategy consulting. Geography is Europe or Middle East, right? Or even within Europe, what are the, if you're not, say, a person that speaks a European language, right? So identifying which are the English friendly countries. For example, Netherlands is one of them, or certain countries in certain cities in Germany are English friendly, right? So identifying clearly what are the target function, sector, and geography, and it's completely okay to have a plan A and plan B, right? So and most schools would also prefer that, especially when you say consulting, because it's a very competitive space. Having a plan B also becomes, and similarly having a target sector, function, geography also for plan B is important, because that ties into why MBA, right? So once you have your destination set, it becomes easier to say what are the skills that you need to get there, and what are skills that you already possess, and what are the gaps that the school would potentially sort of address. And one last point I'll touch on a bit here is basically highlighting transferable skills, right? So if you've already, say, worked in a particular sector, say technology, product management, consulting, and if you're just wanting to shift geography, maybe transferable skills is not so relevant. But if you want to do a sector or a function shift, right? So for example, from technology consulting to management consulting, or from software development to product management, this becomes very key, right? So, sort of talking about what are the base transferable skills. So, in the first case, for example, if you've done, say, IT consulting, you want to do, say, strategy or management consulting. So, interacting with clients, right? The context obviously is different. It will be solving more business problems, not pure tech problems in the latter case, but interacting with clients, analyzing data, sort of understanding different viewpoints from different people. So, those are base transferable skills that definitely need, that'll be good if you highlight an application to sort of say, look, here's where I want to go, here are the skills that I already possess, which I think can be translated into my post MBA sector or function. So with that, we'll have Adhiraj talk about his points on some of his essays.
Yeah, thanks, Arvind. So, I think what this slide talks about is identifying what sets you apart, which is a question I'm sure is occurring to a lot of you right now. As Arvind mentioned, we are coming from an overrepresented background. So, I mean, there are a lot of Indians applying to these schools. So, how do you set yourself apart? The idea being that even though in a few words your story might be very similar to a lot of people applying. So, for example, talking about myself, I am a consultant coming from an engineering background. So, definitely there are thousands of such profiles applying, but you want to specify as much as possible what makes you special and what sort of your goals are, and give a flavor of what you are, how you are as a person. So what you see on the screen is an extract from one of my essays. So I'm writing, I'm a consultant from an engineering background, targeting a strategy consulting role at an MBB tier two. So very generic so far. It's something which the admission committee has seen a lot of times. But then I'm trying to go deeper and trying to specify what makes me different, and I'm trying to do that through my goals. So I have a lot of entrepreneurship background on my CV. So what I wrote is that what I really want to do is to combine my past entrepreneurship experience with the consulting profile I'm targeting to be a sustainability focused entrepreneur in the future. So not only tying in my past experience, but also targeting very directly what I want to do in the future and why that's important to INSEAD. Other examples of what you could give as your story to set yourself apart is, I'm coming from a consulting background, but I actually want to switch into an impact profile and I want to deliver better outcomes for India's poor. So that speaks to your passion as well to help other people, and that's always something which they appreciate. Or you can combine that consulting experience with financial expertise to go for VCs or fintechs. So your motivations need to be as specific as possible. They need to be very realistic, and they need to be very convincing. So keep in mind, anything and everything you're writing, you'll have to justify why you think that's a realistic goal. Apart from your goals, I think extracurriculars, you should all know, are extremely important. They help define you as a person. So that's why these essays ask a lot about, what do you do in your free time, what do you do after work, what are your hobbies. So that's where you can differentiate yourself. You can talk about what makes you passionate, and that's a very important thing as well. And lastly, I think highlighting your personality is crucial because, look, you don't need to change who you are as a person to apply to any B school. It's more about leaning into how you are and justifying how that might be important to the cohort which that B school is trying to assemble. So even if you're coming from, you're an introverted personality, my advice would be to lean into that and to justify how that would be helpful to the school and how you can actually contribute to your colleagues and cohorts out there.
So, and one of the things that maybe I wanted to highlight is on extracurriculars, right? So, and there are a couple of questions that we received also on this point, right? So, so picking Adhiraj's example, right? So, what he spoke about, one of the things that he spoke about was his interest in arts, right? In museums, in galleries, generally in arts. So, I think one of the things that some people misunderstand extracurriculars is just sort of doing an internship in a nonprofit organization, right? Or sort of, while that may be true, if that's something that you're really passionate about, that's completely fine, right? But if that's not a silver bullet to sort of, and there's also an issue there because a lot of people are doing it, right? So getting an internship from a nonprofit or an NGO. So what is important, as Adhiraj was saying, is to identify what generally you're interested in, right? And that may be different. For him, it was arts. For you, it could be cycling, racing, swimming, etc. Whatever it is, and identify what you've done so far. Again, it doesn't have to be anything major, right? It doesn't have to be at a national level, etc. If it is, great, but even otherwise, identifying whatever you've done so far, and importantly, what are the lessons that you've learned, right? So what shaped you during that journey? What are the lessons you've learned, and potentially how it would help in the MBA and post MBA. I think that's maybe something that I would add to this. So we move on to the next part, which is basically talking about how to write compelling essays, right? So, and this is especially for a school like NCR, right? There's about, I don't know if it was 8 or 9 essays in total, so which is quite a lot, right? So it is a time
Yeah.
consuming process. It is sort of a task in itself, especially if you're in working in a high, let's say, pressure job, right? To allocate time to sort of iterate, to sort of go through the whole process. But so, I mean, if we were to sort of just distill down the key things, right? So the first is to identify what are your unique high impact stories, right? And for everyone it's different. So by high impact, what I mean is basically within the context of your project. So let's say you're working as a software developer or as an operations person, right, in a team of 4 or 5 people, and you as an individual contributed to achieving a certain result. So identifying that particular, say, high point, right? So what was the result? So in terms of what you did contributed to. So it could be a certain revenue increase, a certain KPI change, like customer satisfaction levels being changed, or cost reduction, or anything of these sorts. It can be anything different, not based on your sector or topic that you worked on. But identifying, starting with the laundry list is fine. Sort of, putting together all the experiences, all the sort of things, projects that you worked on and off work, and then prioritizing them, right? So prioritizing them based on what, ideally, things that are more recent, that have happened, say, in the past couple of years, and that are most impactful, right? So impactful in terms of the end result that was gotten at due to your specific contribution to it. And generally, what I would suggest is a framework called Carl. So it's basically sort of looking at context, action, results, and learning. So for every experience that you pick from the previous point, right, which is, let's say you worked on a project, right? So what is the context, right? What is the context or the challenges that were surrounding the project, in terms of either in challenges that you directly faced, ideally those, or challenges that were facing the team, and how you sort of, what is setting up the stage, right? So in a way, as giving the context, and then what is the specific action that you took, right? Not the team, not other people, but basically action points that you took to sort of solve the problem, right? And this can vary depending, again, on It can be something as simple as negotiating with someone. It can be a data analysis. It can be sort of interacting with different people or anything of the sort, but specifying your action points and then the results. So results, as I was saying, ideally need to be quantified, right? So resulting in, say, X dollars of X thousand dollars of cost reduction, or Y percentage points improvement in customer satisfaction. So anything that you can quantify is extremely important, right? So especially when you're, let's say, targeting a consulting role or something of the sort, because consultants drive results and they always quantify numbers, right? So and by the way, this applies for any role, but I'm saying especially for consulting, this matters. And finally, L, the learnings, right? So what did you learn from that experience in terms of your professional development, or if it's a personal story, sort of your soft skills that you developed. So for each of the prioritized stories that you've made, following this sort of structure would give you shape to then go to the essays, right? So which is where you need to bring in more concrete examples, right? Once you have your story set up, once you have this framework, identifying basically what are the specific data points or claims, because any example that you give has to be backed with a claim, right? And especially for something like why MBA, right, or why NCR. So a weaker answer, as I was saying, could be something like it's one of the best schools, it has a big brand, it has a good network, right? But backing each of these, all of this is true, by the way, but backing each of these with reasoning or data, right? So in terms of, let's say, alumni network. So even talking about the key firms that alumni work in. Let's say you want to work in consulting in the Netherlands or Middle East after your MBA. Sort of talking about that specific fact, right? That there's a lot of INSEAD alumni in MBBs, Big Fours, in consulting firms in these regions is just a minor addition, but it backs your claim sort of with a specific data point, right? And finally, I think we'll go through it in the next slide. Adhiraj will walk you through it. But basically, showing that you've done your research, right? So talking about what are the specifics, talking to alumni, ideally, attending info sessions that the school hosts, or general info sessions like GMAC, Access MBA, and these kind of sessions host. So networking is pretty key, right? Because that's one of the ways that it, especially for the top B schools, because many people apply, so you need to sort of be in the minds of the admissions officers when they represent your case, right? They may not be making the final decision themselves, but they will be representing you in the discussion that comes up when the final decision is being made. So the more that you can strike a personal sort of connect with them, explaining your situation, your rationale, also asking questions, right, understanding about the program, I think it that definitely goes a long way, and that's something that a lot of people, I think, undermine, right? Yeah, over to you, Adhiraj.
Yeah. So here actually we're trying to give an example of an essay, and these are real extracts from one of the answers I gave. And this is the question which personally I sort of struggled with when I initially saw. So it's asking to give a candid description of yourself as a person and stressing the personal characteristics, strengths, and weaknesses, and which factors have developed your personal development. And this is a 500-word question, so it's supposed to be pretty long. Um, I think what some people, and personally what I initially interpreted it as a opportunity to walk through your CV, but that's not exactly what it is. It's trying to ask you to tell how you are as a person, what drives you, and particularly what are the key points or what have been the key points in your journey, both in terms of positives and negatives, and how they have shaped you as a person. So this is an opportunity to be really open, to be really candid, and to sort of draw the admissions committee into your emotional journey. So everything about your essay and about your application is crafting a story which is compelling to the admissions committee, and it's saying to them that, look, you would like to have this person as part of your cohort. What I personally wrote, and a caveat before diving deeper into this, and to any essay excerpts, look, this is my personal story. Everyone has their own. So yeah, don't try to just pick up points from here and just utilize them in a copy paste manner. Unfortunately, that won't work. But for me personally, what my story was, a journey of using mental resilience and adaptability to overcome adversity. So I think you need to have one or two key themes, both in your essay, but also in the overarching story you're trying to tell. So the theme in my story was to have, to be able to bounce back from setbacks and to use that mental resilience and to use that adaptability. I talk also in my essay how I developed that through my childhood. But then what are the consequences of the personal traits I have? So one of the traits I have is, I'm a little bit of a risk taker. So I'm an entrepreneur. That comes a bit naturally to me. So this manifested this manifested in my story by me turning down an offer from Bain and actually going ahead and starting a business which ended up not doing so well. um, and then this is the situation, this is the context. How did you, this is the weakness which I'm trying to explore, but then how did I turn this around? So any answer you give, particularly towards the weakness, you have to be very sure to identify how you are overcoming it or how you have overcome that weakness and give specific examples. So what I did is I sort of bounced back. I used my mental resilience to not be bogged down by that setback, but launch another business a few years down the line with the learnings I had from my consulting career, and now that business is doing really well, and it's flourishing. So it becomes a very cohesive and very sort of compelling story that okay, this person had a setback due to some character flaws which they improved on, and they use their positive character traits, which is mental resilience and adaptability, to overcome that. And lastly, I think each and every answer you give for every essay, just close it out with tying it back to why you are applying to INSEAD or to any other school, and why that school can help you, and why you really think it's important to do an MBA. So just get into that habit of having the last 3 lines talk about why you think your story would really fit well into the MBA school you're applying to, and yeah, just give an example of how that can work out.
Yeah, one point I would maybe sort of highlight is, especially in Adhiraj's case, right? So he was candid, and which is the question also, right? To be very honest about the mistakes or even failures or weaknesses, right? As the question states. So, and that was, I think, something important, right? So, and that what that demonstrates is self-awareness, right? So, if you're confident and honest to talk about your weaknesses or when you fail and what you learn, that is a very important trait that we schools generally value, right? So, and that's something that I've sometimes noticed some candidates hesitate, right? When they sort of want to talk about their weaknesses, they maybe say something that's a bit more generic, like I'm a perfectionist, or I try to be on time always, and things like that. So those are not really weaknesses, right? So, and most AdCom members can read through those, right? So the more honest you are about your weakness, it's completely okay to have a failed venture, right? What is important is, what are the lessons that you've learned from there, and how have you sort of shaped your decision making in the future? Because that's a trait that is important, right? And that can be translated to your MBA journey and also after your MBA journey. And that is, I think, something that this essay beautifully showed, right? And as Adhiraj was talking about, it's something that the school also valued, right? So any school, in my view, sort of wants to understand if you're looking at yourself from an introspective point of view, right? About what you want, what you've done, what you've succeeded in, what you failed in, what you've sort of learned as a result, because that makes them trust you, right? So when you say something like NCR is the perfect place, unless you've sort of given enough context about yourself and build that trust, barring say the first two paragraphs, just the last one paragraph, or if the first two were not say strong enough, the last one would be punchy, right? So it'll be sort of a generic sort of sentence where saying it is a perfect school for me to build my career. But because he's sort of given all that context, he's given that context of his past experiences, what are his learnings, his failures. So being, I think, in a way honest builds that trust, right, to the reader, with the reader, basically, when they're reading the essay. And that's pretty important. So we have about two questions. So there's a question. Prashant has raised his hand. Just a second, Prashant. So there's a question from Sabina about hobbies. Do we need to have some achievement in our hobby? Like if I'm fond of cooking, do I need to have a YouTube cooking channel or lead a cooking class or whatever else in this field? So, well, interestingly, Sabina, the short answer is no, I don't think so. So there was a girl that I was working with recently who had also cooking as a hobby, right? And again, she did not have a channel or all those shots. So what she did was she used to host cooking sessions, right, with her friends, family, and even colleagues, right, at the workplace that she was working, and she used to invite them over and sort of cook, etc. So what we highlighted in her essays was about how she could do that in LBS, right? So LBS was the school that she applied to, and basically talking about this specific trait, about why she loved cooking, what she basically did, right? What are the different events that she had organized? Those are not, again, very pretty big, so within her circles, and then saying that she would be very keen in organizing those cooking sessions or cooking nights within LBS, right? Because that's an international cohort, and basically people from all around the world would appreciate Indian food, for example. So that was the way that that her essay was presented, and she got it right. So I think you don't have to specifically have an achievement specific to your hobby. You just, what is important is to say why you're passionate about it, what you've done so far in terms of the action points that you've done, and what, how it'll be useful within the school, right? How does that hobby or basically interest or passion of yours, how can you sort of translate that and the lessons onto your experience, to your cohort? How can you share it with more people within the school? Does that answer your question, Savin?
Oh, yes, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Uh, Prashant, if you don't mind, can we have all questions towards the end? We'll just finish the presentation in 5 or 10 minutes, if that's all right. And we'll have a Q&A session with, if you can ask. But if it's urgent, just feel free to sort of unmute yourself and ask the question. All right. So the next part that we'll jump into is how effectively to research your target school, right? So I touched upon it a bit, but basically to dive a bit deeper into, there's three things, right? The first is to identify what are the unique resources within the school, right? So in terms of so there is two things here. One is every school has unique resources, right? So every school has a set of clubs, their alumni association. Some schools are really good in finance careers. Some schools are very good in consulting. Some schools are very good in, you know, technology, product management, etc. But what is it that resonates with you the most, right? So which is why I sort of always suggest to candidates is to sort of keep in mind your post MBA goals, right? What is the target function, sector, geography that you want to get into, and what are the specific resources within that school that are relevant for this goal, right? So, for example, when you say something like consulting or product management, right, a club or an alumni association, or a certain number of alumni in one of the target companies, right, Google, for example, product manager, those are important, right? So there can be n number of things within the school, but you don't have to highlight all of those, right? You just need to focus on the specific things that help your goal, and sort of be very specific in terms of what are those resources that will help you achieve your goal. And another important point is sort of identifying how did alumni make a similar transition, right? Let's say you want to transition from sector A to B, or function A to B, right? There are different places to find this. The school employment report is obviously one of them. Most schools have sort of a pre-MBA percentage-wise split of the class in terms of sector, and similarly for post-MBA. And even talking to alumni, right, through LinkedIn or attending some events, etc., identifying how they made that transition, right? So what in their journey, or what in their experience were the specific resources or points about the school that helped them make that transition, right? So that's one important point. The other is, once you speak to them, everyone has their own journey, and what are the things that you infer from that conversation, right? That'll apply to you, right? Because person A could have done a certain transition, and while, you know, the school might have helped, there can be other factors that play in, right? Because every profile is different, and most B school or MBA recruitments are on a personalized basis, right? So what is also important is your inference in terms of, okay, I spoke to this person, he or she told me these points, this is how the school helped, and these are the things that they found useful. From this is what I infer, right? I bring in ABC skill sets. I sort of have this plan set in place, right? The important part of the puzzle is the plan. What is your plan once you go into school, that you'll do from your side, taking the school's help, of course, but you driving the transition, right? So that is important, and that's also something that I think in Adhiraj's essays was that we found interesting, is to basically say that what is it that you will do from your side in terms of plan, in terms of action points, once you are inside the school, right, to help you go from your pre-MBA sector or geography to your goal, while using the school's resources, alumni network, etc. Well, and the last point is basically, again, network. So I think I'll not go through it again, but basically knowing more people within the school, within the admissions committee, alumni, etc., definitely helps in ways that generally people undermine. So, Adhiraj, do you want to go through this essay as well?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So this essay, it's a 100-word essay, and it's talking about what are your short and long-term career aspirations. So just the word count tells you that, I mean, in this essay, they're really asking for a targeted answer and a very short answer of what are your goals. I think taking a step back, actually, every school has an identity of the sort of typical profile which they attract and they serve best. INSEAD, for example, is famous for being a consulting school. It's also famous for being a global school. So, it places people all over the world, not only in Europe, but also in, Asia and particularly in the Middle East as well, also in the United States. Similarly, other schools like, LBS has a lot of financial backing. If you talk about US schools, MIT, a lot of people from there go into tech. So really research the type of school you're applying to and that tie that in with your career aspirations as much as possible. So talking about what I wrote. So try to be as direct as possible and as concise as possible and as detailed as possible. So you do not want to give a vague answer of I want to explore my career ambitions and uh, improve my learning as a person. No, that I don't think that would be a good answer. What they are looking for actually here is how well thought out your plan is after doing an MBA and also during the MBA. So, for example, what I wrote in my short-term goal is I'm targeting a switch in geography from India to Europe. So, talking about my geography, particularly the UK and Netherlands, because those are English-speaking nations in Europe. And then I'm trying to switch my profile from an operations consulting role into a strategy role. And then I've given some examples of the firms I would try to work in as well. And I think what the admission committee is looking for is a person who is really, really thought out in what they're trying to do. So, I'm sure all of you guys are researching schools and you look at the placement percentages. All these schools have 94, 95% placement rates, after 3 months. So what they do not want is a person who's coming in their blank and they do not achieve the goal they've set out, or they don't have a goal, and then they become unemployed. They remain unemployed after the MBA. So that doesn't bode well for the school, and they genuinely do not want that for their students. So be as compelling as possible, be as well researched and well thought out, and particularly your goals also have to be realistic. So if I'm coming from a consulting background and I say, look, I only want to go into VC or fintech, that's not very realistic in a 1 year program, especially if I do not have any sort of overlapping experiences prior to that. And then talking lastly about the long term goal. So just again crafting a story of how your prior experiences, how your motivations tie into your long term goals, and then how the school itself can help in that. So what I've written is I aim to combine the expertise, connections, and skills I built in my consulting career, tie that in with my prior entrepreneurship experience, to become an innovation and sustainability focused entrepreneur. And I believe INSEAD is the perfect path. So again, going back to the point I made in my last slide, that every essay you write has to be tied in back to how the school can help you. And here, INSEAD is a school which helps build you a lot of connections, which is a good school for a consulting career track. So that sort of ties in. And the long-term goal also ties in with my prior experience as a consultant and entrepreneur, and then it's consistent with the sort of rest of the essays I've written here as well. So again, in a short summary, be concise, be very specific, well researched, and then be very, very realistic. Being realistic is extremely important here.
Great. So now is basically about interviews. So hopefully, you guys apply and get your interviews. In terms of, we'll go through Adhiraj's experience in a minute, right? But basically, if we were to just look at what are some best practices to follow, right, for interviews. The first thing is about researching about the process, right? Because some schools have alumni interviews, right? NCR, HSC Paris, etc., have alumni interviews. Alumni take these interviews. So, and in most cases, they send the profile of the alumni before the meeting to you. So, researching about going through their LinkedIn, what is it that they're working on, how they maybe sort of transitioned, etc. Can be interesting, right? Or in some cases it's with the admissions director. So even going through their profile, for example, how long have they been around? Is there some blogs that they've written? Are there any specific topics that they're interested in? So knowing more about the interviewer is and the process of the interview is the first step, right? And basically preparing a talking point. So the essays can be a great base to set, right? So, and I think that was also something that Ajiraj was doing, was basically we were once because he had all the essays set and everything was strong, preparing talking points for your interview becomes easier, right? So obviously it has to be consistent with what you said in the essays, but it'll have to be slightly shorter, right, in terms of how you go through your experiences, your goals, etc. Following again the CAR framework. Doing mock interviews can really help. Put it preferably with someone that is an alumni or that has done interviews. As part of a process, etc. Working on your body language. Especially most of these meetings are online, but still body language matters a lot, right? So how you communicate, how you sort of look into the eye of the interviewer, or all those sort of stuff, right? Body language, striking a personal rapport, which is basically getting to know them as a person, right? The first, especially the last few minutes, right? Most interviewers, if not all, would ask you, what questions do you have for me, right? So there's only one bad answer to that, right? Which is no questions. So that basically shows that you unless you're really running out of time, and you sort of see that they're in a hurry or something, it's okay to say, I can maybe touch base with you later. But in almost any other case, it's extremely important that you be prepared with questions from your side, right? So which is where the first point helps, right? Researching about the interviewer, the school, and also any question that you have that you can ask an alumni is important to sort of be honest and ask that question, because that's a way that you also build a rapport with them, right? So because that communicates that you trust them with asking a question, and everybody likes to share their opinion, right? Especially in if you're asking them for advice as an alumni. So yeah, I think these are broadly sort of points to keep in mind while preparing for interviews. And with that, we'll go through Adhiraj, your experience, right, in interviews.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to the last point you made about the questions, I think another thing which you would want to avoid doing is asking the interviewer a question which you should actually know the answer to, or which is easily researchable. So if I were to go in and ask that, okay, how many people end up into consulting from INSEAD? I mean, that's available on the website, and the interviewer would say that, look, you're wasting my time. It would be more helpful maybe to ask, what was your experience of the consulting process inside INSEAD? So many people end up there. How does the school actually help? So again, talking to them about their experience, as Arvind said, everyone likes to talk about, everyone likes to share about themselves and how their experience has been. And these alumni are really helpful and really sort of relaxed in that manner. So yeah, just take it as an opportunity to learn more about it. But yeah, just try to be relaxed and conversational. What you do not want to come across as is, if you have rote learned your answer, then you're just repeating it there. That's not a good look. Again, be very, very honest. So okay, so taking a step back, actually, for INSEAD, you have two interviews, which is a bit different from most other European schools. Both interviews are with alums, and they're separate. So the feedback from one alum interview will not affect the other one. So it's very, very important to be honest in the interviews, because see, those alumni have been in your position and they've seen and heard all the stories. And particularly what I found in my interview is they wanted to go beyond my essay answers, and which they had read very thoroughly and which they had really thought about prior to coming into the interview. And they wanted to dive deep into the reasons and the rationale behind my decisions, and what I felt emotionally at those points. What if my actions were logical, or were they not, or were they driven by emotion, and how aware of how aware of that I was or I was not. Those are the things the interviews that are really trying to get to, and you have to be completely honest with them. If you're trying to mislead them or be disingenuous, I think they catch on really, really quickly. Another point, and this one, so have a very, very convincing reason of why you want to do an MBA. So this is something you'll answer over and over in every essay for every school. Every school asks this question of, why do you want to do an MBA? But inside the alum interviews, generic comments about, I want to build a network, I want to grow as a person or grow my career. Those things are not enough. Both my interviews, this was the thing they grilled me on the most, in one case for like half an hour. And one of my interviewers, a very senior person, he said, "Look, you don't need an MBA. I am not convinced you need an MBA, and I don't. You already have business experience. Why are you coming to do an MBA? You are just wasting 1 year, and you are wasting a ton of money to do it." And I had to really work hard to convince him and to give him all sorts of reasons. So an example I gave is, I would want to utilize this as an opportunity to switch into a different profile abroad. And he shot that down. He said, look, you can apply for a job anyway. I don't think an MBA is critical to that. And we sort of worked through the answer, and in the end he sort of admitted that the overall sort of points I was making made sense. So again, be very specific and be very genuine about it. Just generic platitudes would not be enough. Yeah, talking about your motivations and feelings, I think I already spoken about that. It's very important. Those are the types of things they're looking for. And open about your mistakes as well. So I think we've all had things, and in fact they're looking for people who have had failures or mistakes and who have been very open about it, who have taken the risks to put themselves out there and be open to failures. But then the most important thing is what you learned from that and very specific examples of what you learned. So it's not enough to say, okay, I was a risk taker, but now I improved. But like, how did you improve? Can you give me an example of how you improved or how your decision making has changed? So yeah, those are the sorts of things which they really need to get out of the interview. And last point, just make it a pleasant experience for them. So they're extremely busy people. They're taking out an hour of time to come and talk to you. If you can make them laugh, or if you can make it an engaging interview, I think you've done something right, because yeah, you don't need to bore them for that 1 hour. They're taking out their time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are really valid points, right? So, and maybe I'll just share. So, I've been interviewing candidates as for my school, right, for HEC Paris as an alumni interview for a couple of years, right? And one of the things that I've noticed is, well, two things actually. One is basically to really keep it very conversational, right? So the key difference between essays and an interview is here you're directly talking to a person, right? So even if it may be online or in person, you have to sort of remember that the, especially if it's alumni, right? They're trying to know you as a person, right? They're trying to see if you fit within the cohort, if you fit within the community. So if they can already see you as one among themselves, right, one among their classmates or your future alumni, that really helps, right? So being very open, being very sort of uh, um, honest about what you want to do. And this is also a question that sometimes I also drill deep into, right? And some candidates is why MBA if it's not convincing, and it's completely okay to sort of be grilled during the interview, right? Because some candidates feel that during the process when that is happening that they lose their chances, or that's it's almost on a sinking ship. That's not the case, right? Because the interviewer is actually trying to understand what your rationale is, and different people have different ways of asking the same question, right? Some of them may sound sort of a bit more aggressive, some of them may sound soft, etc. But it doesn't always mean that if the interviewer is not convincing initially for a certain answer, your I think role is or your key role is to basically keep it conversational and be honest, right? So because if a school is generally not a fit for you, then maybe that's not the school, right? There are other schools that you apply to and that you get in. But the key point is to make sure that what you're saying is true to yourself, right? And that really comes through, even if it's a video call or in person. That really comes through, and that's something that I've noticed, right? That the candidates that really shine during these interviews are ones that have really thought through their answers, their points, and that are also friendly, that they approach it in more of a friendly manner. So with that, we will go to questions. Maybe just 1 or 2 minutes before that, if you could share, Adhiraj, with a bit about how this process that we were working on helped you in specific for INSEAD, that'll be great, and then we'll jump to Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think so. Coming into it, I honestly didn't realize how important having a good sort of guide and a good feedback point for crafting your essays was. And well, I can honestly say, Arvind, I don't think I would have gotten into any school if I wasn't working with Arvind. And I think Arvind and admitStreet in general did a great job on all my applications and particularly on INSEAD. And how they helped really was in prioritizing the things which I did in my essay and then structuring them in a manner which was really impactful. And I think the before and after of after Arvind had gone in and done his edits, I think that was a thing of beauty, and it's something. I think it is essential to to my success in applying to INSEAD. Um, it really helps having a third person or sort of a separate point of view outside of your own personal journey, which who can give you feedback feedback on what is important and what is not important. And then particularly, we've run through a bit of questions, but INSEAD has many more. And the AdmitStreet team, having advised so many people for those INSEAD essays, they know exactly what the admissions committee is looking for in each and every one of those essays. And so, their advice and their help in driving that was crucial to me. And I'm yeah, I had a really great experience there.
Hey, thank you, Adhiraj. And yeah, I'm really happy that that worked out, and that you got it. So what we will now do is basically again just a quick read through. I'll send the slides, guys, with the recording, because some people email me sort of saying that they were not able to join in, and also requested